Hey, this is Joe Mazur, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
Yeah, Joe is a sports anchor out in the on the East Coast, and he, I guess, is related somehow to my man Erik Kleinsmith, who's my co-host today, and used to be my commander back in the olden times. So I'm going to let Erik kind of introduce Joe, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Joe is actually my brother-in-law. I am married to his sister that we met this August will be 28 years that we've been married. But Joe, I met while we were still dating when we were both living in Colorado, and Joe was a student at Colorado State University. So since then, though, he has moved around to a lot of different TV stations, doing both regular news and primarily sports. And so he's been. I'm trying to count the different places: Pueblo, El Paso, and now Raleigh-Durham is where he's out of the ABC affiliate, ABC 11. So he's been my go-to guy. I am about as illiterate on sports as Forrest Gump, but so I can say one thing per sport, and then that's all I know about that sport. But it's great to listen to Joe, and we regularly tune into some of his broadcasts, depending on what's going on.
Joe, what the heck what is it? What was your degree in? Environmental science and in communications? How the heck was that? What is that? What kind of hippy dippy degree is that thing now?
Yeah, I started out in natural science. Thought I might want to go into psychology, and I guess about entering my senior year, one of my buddies was telling me while we were playing basketball that he was interning doing sports at the local newspaper. And he was getting to cover sports and starting to write some articles. And I thought, wait, what? Like, that's a major. And he said he was going to intern at the TV station the semester coming up. And I thought, wow, that's maybe something I want to look into. And I immediately got a second major in technical journalism is what it's called. And got an internship at KUSA in Denver. And fortunately, got a job right out of school in Pueblo, Colorado, the beautiful Pueblo, Colorado, doing news. And it took me a while to get to sports, but then once I got to sports, I've been doing it ever since, and have been in Raleigh-Durham for almost 20 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. My undergrad degree is in broadcast journalism, TV, radio, and I never got that first job. I never could. Like, they were really bad at explaining internships in the Bay Area. So they're like, you go somewhere, you work really hard, they don't pay you, and I'm like, well, that's unfortunate because I need to get paid when I work. So I would go work at Costco, whatever. I never got that first job. I tried Missoula, Montana. I went to the back end of the markets, all the tiny markets. And I could just never break in. So good for you for doing that. It's like I'm looking at myself, like my alternate self. So it's cool to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks. That's what we tell everybody. Everybody who comes through our doors that's a college student or wants to get into broadcasting, get your foot in the door doing anything.
Yeah. And
then see if you can maneuver to where you really want to be.
I got to tell you, when you first moved to Pueblo and started your job there, I had, I guess, a lot of sympathy or admiration for it, because that was probably one of your harder jobs in terms of, I mean, I think you had a police scanner that you would just have to have it sitting side by side and unfortunately wait for something to happen to go out and get the scoop and go out and get the story. So it was that kind of reactive. You lost so much of personal life during that time.
Yeah, it was a really interesting time. First of all, I was broke. I was making no money. I was bartending on the side at Applebee's. I was making less than $13,000 a year to do what you call a one-man band news reporter. I was bureau chief, making it sound super exciting. It was terrible. Like you said, Erik, I listened to the police scanner. If there was a car accident, I ran out with a giant piece of camera equipment at the time. This is late 90s, and tried to get some video and get it on for the newscast. Completely uninterested in covering news, city council meetings, all that kind of stuff. So it was very challenging. There was a lot of times when I wanted to quit and move to Denver and go do something more fun. But everybody's got a different path, and kind of come full circle, because having done all that news back then and kind of transitioning with this whole non-sports time the last 5 weeks, I feel pretty comfortable doing those kind of news reports. I'm pretty versatile that way, so it's keeping me employed. So that was maybe something I needed to have under my belt.
When you hear what Erik did in the Army, and having a bunch of guys like us as counterintelligence agents, what are your thoughts about that? I mean, he thinks you're crazy for going out to,
Right.
nowhereville. No offense to Colorado, I love all of it, but that going to the 427th smallest market in the nation, or whatever number Pueblo is. What do you think about like Erik when he's running off to do tank battle or Bosnia?
Oh yeah, insane. Yeah, Bosnia. I mean, really? Like places that I would never dream of visiting. He's out there fighting the good fight and living. Where was that, in Arizona? That tiny town, super hot.
Sierra Vista. That was fantastic.
Yeah, moving all around. I mean, completely different world, really.
But you know what, though? The skill sets are the same. As a guy who's got a broadcast degree, I just acted like a field reporter. My job was to go get those unknown unknowns and answer questions and develop sources. And, this all sounds familiar to you, write reports, write stories, whatever it was,
Yeah. Well, it all comes from having a passion about what you're doing, right? If you are super into it and you love doing it, no matter where you are, no matter the circumstances, you're going to find the silver lining. And I'm sure that's exactly, Erik, kind of how you felt when you were in the stuff.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like it when you're breaking track at 2 a.m. and, picking yourself up in the mud and think that kind of thing. But once you look at the longer picture, you're just like, oh, I can't believe I did that, but I'm glad I did. And I'm glad I'm not doing it now. And that's part of it. You again, the same thing. So.
Oh my gosh! When you said that, I was just thinking, Erik, about doing stand-to in a Schaffenburg. It's like a 50-year-old guy. Like, what are we doing here? Let's go actually practice the hard stuff the impossible part of collecting. In another place, human to human. Why are we doing stand-to anywhere? It's silly.
Right. Well, the thing is one of my big things was neat to see. I watched Joe doing the standard reporting out of Pueblo, but then as soon as he switched to sports, it was like, boom, he's in his element. I mean, Joe, you could tell right there that you were a natural. You had a passion for that immediately. And I think while we were living in Germany, we even had VCR tapes or VHS tapes of your broadcasts. Your mom would mail them to us. And we'd watch them, and quite frankly, you were doing a lot better than the Armed Forces Network folks were doing. So it was a nice, refreshing change just to watch somebody from the normal world doing broadcast sports or something like that for us. So, but that was my thing. Is like, so what was your how'd you get your transition in from regular news into sports, and how'd that whole process go?
Well, there wasn't really much of a transition because I never really saw myself as being a news reporter. It was just, that was the first opportunity I got, so I took it. But deep down, I probably knew that if I didn't break into sports, I was going to be, it was going to be a very short broadcasting career, because I just didn't care about any of the stuff I was covering at the time. So I moved to Colorado Springs and was working there in news for maybe 6 months. And then I got an opportunity in Grand Junction, Colorado, a much smaller market, up in the 200s. If you go, number one being the biggest. I don't know. There was maybe 240 at the time in the late 90s. And so I couldn't have gone much further down the pole. And they wanted to give me a pay cut to boot. So I was making around $14,000 at the time. They wanted to cut my salary to do sports. And I said, no, I just couldn't do it. It was the same company. And it was going to be like a $600 or $700 pay cut. And I said, no. And thankfully they said, okay. So, but yeah, once I got into Grand Junction and, I was just in my element. I just have always loved sports, and going to the games and telling people stories of wins and losses and what they've overcome and how it makes our community better. And it's just been something that I've always been good at.
When you look for those stories, some of them are obvious. You can update us all on the nightly, scores when there are sports to play. But what about those other stories, those award-winning opportunities that are out there? We had Shelly Smith on the show. She talked about how when Magic's story about getting AIDS broke, he couldn't get to Magic. She's like, it doesn't matter. We'll get to all the people around Magic and tell the story from their point of view. Bam, she starts winning awards. What are those kind of things for you that you're looking for?
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit different because, she's got a lot more freedom in her role versus mine in the daily news grind. You're trying to turn stories fast and you don't have a lot of time to tell them. So my expertise is more about being able to compartmentalize things quickly and turn them quickly. We're talking about sometimes we'll shoot a story at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and it's on at 6:20 and it's a minute 30 and so you've got to be very concise. You've got to be a very tight writer. You got to be creative so that you can be able to tell that story that quickly. So it's just it's a different kind of a thing, the daily sports news, for sure.
Well, except for now.
Yeah.
Your whole world has been turned on its head. And you look at all the different businesses that are affected. It's with what I do today, I'm not affected whatsoever, only because I work for American Military University, which is 100% online, and it's always been online. So this is par for the course. But from this, the entire sports industry, what has happened to your day to day? And I guess my first question is, when did it start, and then what's happened to it?
Yeah, so about 5 weeks ago, I'm at the ACC basketball tournament in Greensboro, and we're all we know this virus is coming and it's going to affect sports, but we're not sure how. And I was with our other sports person in the department, Bridget, and we're sitting there watching the games courtside, and I'm saying, this doesn't feel right. Like, I'm not sure that even tomorrow. This would have been a Wednesday. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking the Thursday games, I don't think they're going to have fans. Like, this, I don't know, something's weird about this. And then, go home that night and watching the rest of the games that night. And then Rudy Gobert tests positive with the Utah Jazz. And in a matter of hours, it just snowballs into no sports. And it's kind of one of those things that you'll always remember kind of where you were, how it happened. I'll never forget that night, just kind of watching sports dissolve. And then the next day, all the big leagues canceling and just one after the other. And, for me, it's been crazy. Like, basically the next day they said, you can't come into the studio at all. So, I was permanently working from home. Which thankfully we were kind of already getting equipped to do that, because we have to report on the road anyway. So I've already got a laptop and a camera and I can shoot my own stuff. But the next, I think Saturday was the next day that I was on TV, and they were like, do something. What? I don't know. What am I going to do? And I was actually getting video of my wife working out in the living room thinking, I don't know. Is this a story? Like, I don't even know what's happening. And I would say it's gotten a little bit easier because the stories have been more defined, and I've just been doing all kinds of different things. Like today on my day off, I went and shot an interview with this man who owns a local business in Raleigh. It's a furniture store, and he's had it for 9 years. And, right after the governor shut all the businesses down, he closed his doors and let go of his 4 employees and has applied for all these loans from the government and hasn't gotten a penny yet, and doesn't know when he can open, doesn't know how he's going to pay his rent. Same things that millions of people are going through across the country. And that's like, that's kind of what I'm covering now, because that's important, and that's, to me, I'd rather cover those stories now than just get a football coach bemoaning that there's no football, because those things will start again. But these are people's lives and livelihoods, and it's going to take a long time for them to recover. So it's important stuff.
How many times can you do the same report that just, in the military, it's just called negative sit rep. It's like, how many of those can you put out that just says, guess what, no sports, and everybody's unhappy about it. See you tomorrow.
Right.
It's so I know you've had to adjust. What's, to my knowledge, it's like what's been your view of the entire as an industry, and then where do you see it in 30 days, 60 days, end of the year?
Yeah, from a broadcasting sports perspective, it's
because you see everything. I mean,
yeah,
you have a one over the world, viewpoint of every sport from a very high level on what, and you can look at it from a business standpoint or however, but you're looking at it's like, these guys aren't going to make it, if they keep going this trajectory. You wonder how long, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's.
Oh, no. I think the players, the teams, the organizations, the leagues, they'll probably all recover because, as a society, we love them, and it might be, social distancing for a while, or may take a year to get all the fans back or whatever, but they'll recover. The question for me is, how are we going to cover them as a broadcasting industry? How's that going to change? Are we still going to do nightly highlights on the weekends? It was kind of already trending towards no, because you can watch everything basically live anyway. And if you're really interested in highlights, you can get them on Twitter or whatever your social media go-to is. So the numbers were already trending away from that anyway. So does this permanently knock out highlight shows? Am I now going to be doing this kind of a role on the weekends or, whenever there's not games? A buddy of mine who works for the Big Ten Network, on-air talent, texted me today that he's been asked to take a 15% pay cut. So those are already going. That's already happened through ESPN. And I'm sure people are going to get furloughed and not be coming back. And, it's just going to change a whole lot of things, like how they're going to cover games, even ESPN. Like, are they still going to go to the games, or can they just do it through Zoom now? You know what I mean?
Right.
Because the costs will be so much less for, Disney or whatever the parent company is. So it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, like you think about someone like George Michael and the Sport Machine, that model died off a long time ago, right? Because you could get highlights, from ESPN all the time, and it's hard to sell dog race highlights, as any kind of a segment reliably. So, what does it become? Do you get more access to the players for longer form things, or and so often the questions after the games are. It's a formula, you ask these, how did it feel? What did you think? Those kind of questions. There needed to be some kind of evolution there anyhow.
Right. And to your point about Shelley Smith, what makes good stories anyway, in my opinion, is emotion and people, right?
Yeah.
So, me talking about cars going, in circles for 2 minutes, that's not that interesting, but how people are overcoming adversity, how people are connecting with fans, how people are helping their community. That stuff will never go away, I don't think. And maybe in a lot of ways, I think having gone through this exercise the last 5 weeks gives us another avenue to try to connect with people. I think for a long time, as we graduated through the technology of television, like say in the late 90s, it was forbidden, even in Grand Junction at my station, to broadcast any perceived lesser quality video. We strived for the best because the technology was still gradually going up, and you didn't want to have anything below what the norm was at the time.
Right.
So now we've gotten to like 4K, HD, whatever. And now we've backtracked in the last 5 weeks where it's okay and it's acceptable to put on, crummy FaceTime video or Skype or whatever, because it's really not that important. So let's say a local golfer for us wins a tournament in Puerto Rico. Well, I don't have any way to interview him. At least I didn't. And now I do. I can just text him and say, hey, man, can you jump on FaceTime with me and let's get your story out there, because those are kinds of what people want to see. And I think this may make that more accessible.
You know, for a while, I was trying to get a Lakers podcast off the ground. I was working with the Lakers to see if they were going to pick it up. And one of the things that was neat was because I was in Southern California, I could pop up to LA and grab like the head coach. I grab almost anybody because, frankly, they're kind of bored at some point. Like, they've done their work. Tomorrow's the game. You know, yeah, I've got half an hour to talk to you. And you really could find a lot more interesting things to talk about. And they could also talk about their specific charity, their camp, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And you know, it was someone with very little access. I had open access if I was out there willing to hustle out the story. There's definitely a lot of professional grade work that can be done in that area.
Yeah, and you know, that makes me think of another point. So in my market, you know, we basically have 3 NBA teams: NC State, North Carolina, and Duke. And over the years, as things have evolved, you know, our access to them has gotten more challenging. You know, Mike Krzyzewski at Duke is a, you know, world-renowned figure, one of the greatest coaches of all time in any sport. And, you know, so they don't really care how much access I have to them, right?
Yeah.
So maybe not him necessarily as an example, but all these coaches and these programs who are like, you know, we don't need you to come out here and bother. We don't need to tell our story through you. Well, now they're kind of coming back around to me and like, hey, let me do a Zoom call. Don't forget about us, you know, because we need you to get our content out there. So maybe they'll be more willing to do things with us because of this.
It's easy. It's interesting how quickly they realize that the lifeblood of you know, of their entire business model is almost totally dependent on how they are covered, not how well they're covered, but just getting the coverage from you and other news sources. So I mean, that's, to me, is the wild part. My big question is, in your crystal ball, is there going to be an NFL season?
Yeah. I think that the NFL is so enormous and such the lifeblood as it is to our society. There will definitely be some sort of a season. Yeah. Will it be condensed? Will it be without fans? I think there will be in some capacity, even if it's in late fall. Maybe they don't start on time.
Yeah,
they'll have some sort of games.
Some of these sports, you know, and I see it in my business of academia. These colleges and universities, they you know, I'm already seeing announcements and letters from where I'm an alumni from or whatever, just that they've already come out and said, we're having classes in the fall. And in between the lines, and you could say the same thing with the NFL or sports teams, it's really saying we cannot afford not to have a season this year, or we cannot afford, our business model can't sustain another season or another semester of all these kids staying at home or all these fans staying out of the stadium. So whether they take, you know, the precautions and change the way of how many folks are in the stadium or something like that, I don't think they can sustain. They just can't suck up a year and just say, we're going to go virtual, or we're going to run our season, but we're not going to run it with fans in the stadium or something like that. Right. There's a whole point of how much risk do we take before the cure is worse than the risk of the disease itself. And right now it's killing it.
Right. If you look at the Power 5 conferences in football, if you took away all of their home games for one season, you're talking about wiping out tens of billions of dollars from athletic departments that are already, you know, overspent as it is. And that's really where the university makes a lot of their money. So,
and as we're seeing already in the news today, there's not a lot of people that have sympathy for or giving them any kind of, you know, who's going to give a sports franchise a bailout?
Right.
Or some sort of, hey, we're going to get, Harvard University, once Trump mentioned that they were making $40 billion off of their investors and royalties and alumni or whatever. And Trump's like, why are they getting a $9 million loan? And they immediately said, well, we're not going to take the loan. So it's sports is going to be a tough one. It's like, how do you say as the, chairman or CEO of, the Carolina Panthers, hey, we need a bailout.
Right.
It's not gonna happen. So.
No, not when these players are making this,
right,
exorbitant amount of money.
Right, but maybe you can verify this. I'm seeing some stories that some of these players are stepping up and paying for out of their own salary. They're paying for the folks that work at the stadium who are out of jobs right now and things like that. I mean, that is completely honorable. Are you seeing some of that, or?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first guys to do it was Zion Williamson, who's the most talked about player in the NBA in his rookie year.
Okay.
And went to Duke. Just a great young man. And he immediately said that he was going to pay for all the New Orleans Hornets staff. I don't know how long or how much, but he was going to give them something. So that's been tremendous, and so many other athletes have stepped up. You can argue there's a lot of non-sports people in the world, and they think everybody's overpaid and all that. But
right.
When it's time, the Drew Breeses, he gave $1 million. I mean, Steph Curry in San Francisco, they've started some stuff. They all do a lot. Robert Kraft of the Patriots sent his plane out to China to get masks and things like that.
Right.
So they use their power and their resources too.
Those are the kind of stories that you like to hear. I mean, those are the ones that restore your faith in whether it's in humanity or it's the other, or just athletics in general. It's like these guys are doing a fantastic job. They don't have to be on the court in order to set an example of what they can be for young adults or whoever. That's why I think it's fantastic. If you pick up on more of those are the stories that that folks are going to want to see. Besides Gronk and Tom Brady hugging on the street in Tampa Bay or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the owner end of it, right? Like you talk about the Hornets, Michael Jordan can certainly afford to take every single, personally, with his own personal finances, say everybody who works for the Hornets is still going to get their pay. And he can look around his media table and say, you wealthy guys are going to have to figure it out for yourself. But anybody who's not in the boardroom, he can certainly afford that. Well, we don't get to hear those stories. I know that kind of spirit exists. I remember when Jeff Fuller for the 49ers broke his neck on Monday Night Football and lost the use of his right arm, and his career was instantly over. I remember that Eddie DeBartolo said, you don't play football anymore, but don't ever worry about money. Your kids are going to go to school. Everything is instantly. He did that. There was no hesitation. We need more of those stories so we can maybe like these owners a little bit more, because they're pretty easy to hate,
Right. Well, and they're a lot of them. So like Tom Dundon here, who owns the Carolina Hurricanes hockey franchise, they're playing the game too, right? So they want to help their people, but they also want to make sure they're getting what they can from the government. They want to pay for 55%, or let them collect unemployment for so long and then pay them on the back end or something like that. So, they've got to toe a fine line to make it to everybody's benefit as best they can. But.
Go ahead, Eric.
Oh no, I'm agreeing with them. I think it's anytime you have somebody who's at the pinnacle of their success, you're always going to have your detractors that are going to be saying, well, he probably didn't make his money fair and square. I know he's worth millions, but I'm sure he cheated somebody else in order to get to that. That's not always the case, but that gets passed over in a lot of with social media or whatever. It's just like, he makes money, he must be evil. And that's not. I mean, you think it sounds crazy, but that's the prevailing thought. And so when you get a shutdown like this, people think, well, these athletes, they make so much money. Well, how about the entire industry of people that it affects, from the suppliers to the folks who work in the stadiums to the folks doing, media productions to the gosh, even the guys who do apparel. Everybody's suffering. My daughter works at Dick's Sporting Goods. She hasn't gone into work in weeks. The last time she went in was purely to fulfill mail orders, and it was just, and that's it. So it's just, it affects everybody. So that's why, again, when somebody looks at the next season, it's like, we got to have a next season.
Right.
How many people have licensing agreements right now with major sports teams or leagues that just like, they sell T-shirts. Maybe they're in the mall, maybe they're at the stadium, and maybe at the major league, national level, it's not as much of a problem because it's a bigger contract. But you go to a minor league park where a guy spends $10,000 a year to have access to sell whatever, that's gone, and that person isn't sitting fat with a lot of money, they're hurting for sure.
Yeah. Take that down to a macro level, right? We've all been to a baseball game, major league, you're walking up and there's somebody selling some waters for $1 a pop out of their cooler. And maybe in the country illegally can't even apply for any sort of help. So they count on that money on a game-to-game basis. They're not getting any of that right now because baseball is not happening. So there's a lot of, the trickle down is amazing.
Yeah. And I'm even thinking of some of the little league sports, just the summer swim leagues that are not going to happen. And then, all these other, we got travel baseball and things like that. There's some athletes, especially if you look at the college athletes, they were relying on this past season on whatever spring sport they were doing, whether it was cross country or whatever. They were relying upon that to help them break into the next stage of their career, whether it was an athletic career or anything. And all of a sudden that got wiped out.
Yeah.
Was, to me, that's, as soon as I saw that, that's, and I'm talking to both my kids who are in college now. My daughter's on the track team for James Madison University, and she's like, there's all the seniors, they missed their entire senior year. And I was like thinking about how many of them were relying upon that for, a professional next step that they no longer have.
That's a great point. Like the coaches who are coaching the kids specifically, like I make my career, like the guy who's coaching up all the Southern California quarterbacks that are going to maybe go to USC or UCLA, they can't do that. That kid also misses that coaching time too, or Driveline is an exploding brand in the pitching game. Here in LA, Kenley Jansen and Kershaw went there this past offseason. Imagine now these guys come out strong. How many people are going to come to Driveline now and go, I want some of that magic, that stuff, this marketing bonuses. Yeah. It just keeps going, right? It just gets its fingers into everything.
Yeah. I actually did a story a couple weeks ago on a gal who, local soccer player. I think they had played 9 games in her high school career. I don't know how many games they had, maybe 20. And she was already getting some looks to play in college. She was borderline, so she was the captain of the team, an okay team, not a real good team in the area, but certainly, a strong second half of the season or whatever could have potentially gotten her a scholarship that she's now likely not to get.
Yeah.
And that's just one person out of, like you were saying, Eric, so many. No senior night, you don't get to celebrate after, playing varsity for how many years or whatever.
And so for 90% of the folks who are doing that, that's really the high point. So they're not expecting anything after college. They're not expecting any, contract or whatever, but they would like to have, their recognition while they were there. And that just, amongst everything else. I did see a story today that the state of Utah was talking about suspending the bar examination for lawyers. And I'm wondering, how does that translate into sports? It's like, how do you recruit the next season of professional ball players when you haven't seen anything? Do you do a bunch of individual media, media events, like I'm trying to remember the quarterback's name, and invite all the media to watch you work out, or how do you do it?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I spoke with Elliot Avon, who's NC State baseball coach this week, and because I was kind of wondering the same thing. Like, I was trying to find some high school baseball players who, like you were saying, kind of needed to show out to try to get a look. And unfortunately for them, their season's just over. Now the draft, Major League Baseball hasn't made a decision yet on what they're going to do with the draft. Are they going to skip the draft? Are they going to have 5 rounds? Are they going to, what are they going to do? The college kids are going to get another year of eligibility. So they're all going to come back. So really, for a lot of these high school kids, they're kind of going to be stuck anyway, because there's not going to be very many openings at that next level. And some of the high school kids who would have been drafted later on in those rounds, they're not even going to have those rounds. So it's an interesting conundrum.
Yeah.
Hey, let's get a little positive, because you're killing my vibe. It's like, oh God, it's horrible.
No.
So let's make Joe the commissioner of baseball, and you need some creative ideas. We're going to have a baseball season. They're pushing hard to do it. What do you want to? It's a crazy season. It's already going to be weird. What do you want to try to do? What are some options?
Yeah, I've read let's boil it down to a couple of places and have them all in Arizona or somewhere in Canada or something. I guess I would take that if that was an option versus nothing, but I'm not sure why. I guess I don't understand why we couldn't have several cities who are not as problematic with the virus that could institute some sort of no fan, let's just play the games, check everybody's temperature, make sure at least the players and the umpire are okay, and go play. Like, I don't, handful of cities, you can play triple headers in the park, and, cut really Major League Baseball should have cut their season in half years ago anyway, because it's way too long, or at least a third of it. So let's just cut down the number of games and have them more meaningful. What do you think, Pete?
I love baseball. It's one of my favorite things to think about and talk about. I like take however many games we're going to have left and do like they did in '81 in the strike, and just have a split season and just go out and play that way. And that way you can have the divisions are all there. You can have a tournament, and just make a tournament and make that a longer form and get more playoff baseball out of it. It's crazy when you get the short season where teams can get hot that shouldn't be hot, and they can get in. You don't want to prevent that, but you also don't want to penalize, like the Dodgers are a team around here. They just picked up an enormously expensive player. They traded a lot of options out for to get Mookie Betts, and now they're not going to get the advantage of him. So let's get these guys in the field and let's play this game so we can see what happens. And I don't know, just give everybody an opportunity to play in the playoffs, have a long tournament style format, and go from there.
Well, that's what everybody loves anyway, right? Everybody loves the playoffs, and they were already going to add a couple of teams to the mix anyway. So I'm all for it. At this point, I just want to see some sports. Like Taiwan baseball doesn't really do it for me, and I'm not going to get up in the middle of the night to watch it. I'm kind of looking forward to the draft tonight just to talk about sports, but more interested in just kind of seeing how they're going to do a virtual draft with such an enormous, product that they were trying to put on anyway. But
yeah,
if there's no baseball season, we're talking about a really long summer.
Yeah. Before my son came home from college, him and his buddies got into this online marble racing. It was just watching marbles going down different chutes and paths and everything, and they had an announcer and they had a stadium and everything, and it just became a big betting thing. For college kids, you're betting alcohol, but that it just became something like that. But it's like that's not going to sustain more than a few weeks of entertainment before you actually want to see real people playing, not marbles.
Professional plinko.
Right.
We need it for our mental health, right? You want to talk about positivity, like it's a release. Sports is a release. We want to see great people do great things. Missing out on the Olympics this summer. I don't follow all the athletes, but I can turn on any event in the middle of the day and watch, water polo or handball or whatever it is. And I don't even care if it's our country, just to watch people compete at such a high level.
Right.
It's an escape, and it's good for our mental health to have them.
This and the Olympics are, I'd like to get your impressions on that one, because my first impression when hearing about the Olympics being canceled or postponed was, for some of these athletes, this is once every 4 years. This is the one part that they're in their prime and are most competitive, and then that's it. You know, they're at the top of their peak in terms of age.
Yeah.
But what's your feeling on what they're going to do with the Olympics, if they're going to move them or whatever?
Yeah, well, they've already announced they're gonna do it next year.
Okay.
There was only really a 1-year window to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. You know, like especially in track and field, all of those athletes who are at that caliber, they just geared their whole lives toward peaking, right, at whatever event or that year. So it changes everything. It opens up, you know, a whole new set of competitors who, you know, elite level athletes weren't going to have to compete against. It ages a few people out, you know, who are borderline anyway. So yeah, big impact.
Wow. And, you know, I guess then on the plus side, it's like somebody may say, oh, geez, I just didn't make it by this amount. Oh gosh, it's next year. Oh, you know what? I might have a shot now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, if you're injured and you're like, you know, I can't.
Right. Oh, that's true. That exactly.
But then there's going to be the flip side of that too, right? So if they really do one next year, somebody's going to get injured and be like, I would have won it last year.
Yeah, I would have been great last year, but
yeah,
no, that's too bad.
Right before it broke out, Willie Calhoun, he's from my hometown. He was finally getting his shot at being a full-time outfielder for the Rangers. You know, he had been waiting, and the guy can crush the ball. It's just the other parts of his game have held him up a little bit. So he was finally getting his shot, and then he gets hit in the face with a fastball and it breaks his jaw. He might be the one guy. It's like, yes, I'll be back in time, you know, because it's just, the timing it's going to be sad for some and it's going to benefit some others, you know. And how about career numbers? You know, someone like Verlander, who's within range of maybe getting to 300 wins, just lost, let's say, 6 wins off of that, maybe even 10 wins off of that total that he needs to get to 300.
Right.
You know, it's little things like that are going to have an impact.
The biggest thing for me is letting the Astros off the hook, right? Like I was really excited about this baseball season so that I could vehemently root against the Astros.
Oh,
yeah.
And, you know, obviously we're in such a short news cycle as it is in society, you know, starting the season this late and then having had all this other stuff that's way more important happen, you know, kind of just puts more distance on that terrible act of cheating that they did, and maybe people will be more forgiving.
Yeah.
Do you think they're unique in their guilt? Obviously, the news came out yesterday or today about the Red Sox, but isn't every team doing some form of over-the-line cheating at some point? I mean, earlier in that season with the Astros, the Dodgers got in trouble for lasering fielding positions, and like that's electronic means you can't do that, you know?
Yeah, that egregiously, like I don't know how you can be more egregious of a cheater than that. Stealing signs with that system. I mean, sure, you can talk about players taking substances and that form of cheating too that went on for decades. And probably way before that, right?
Yeah.
So there's always been some of that in the game, and it will always be in the game in every sport. Everybody's going to try to get whatever edge they can get. I'm naive. I hope not.
Yeah. Why is it okay to put a dead guy's patellar tendon into your own knee, but it's not okay to have a really great diet? You know, I mean, I don't understand that part too, like the difference, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. As a guy who has a foreign tendon in my knee. So yeah, that's interesting. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah. Or, you know, wrapping a band around your ulnar collateral ligament, or, you know, any number of things. You can put an external piece of metal on your body as a football player. You can wear a cast on your arm, and that's a sign of toughness. But if you take peptides or some kind of thing to get healthier faster, you're the enemy. You know, we got to figure that out at some point.
Yeah, it's just so many variables. You know?
Yeah,
I guess that's what makes it great, right? Gives us something to talk about.
I've actually spent time going back just to think about the disruption of the sports season, and I just, as a history nut, it's like, well, how did the sports season? How did they adjust to the disruption for World War II? This was the U.S. in a 4-year war where athletes stopped playing, or they were either shipped off to war, and this is where the whole League of Their Own storyline came from. But this is kind of a one season version of that so far, of things are going to adjust and then things may go back to normal, but not everything. And so that's my I guess another question to Joe is like, what do you see as not going back to normal when they finally do?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's certainly some things that might not survive, like, big impact. We're talking about major corporations really taking a hit, right? So who sponsors all those NASCAR teams? Major corporations.
Right.
Chevy, Ford, they're not doing well.
Right.
All the way down to the teeny tiny sponsors. So maybe if I'm going to pick a sport that doesn't survive in the current form, it would be NASCAR, which was already having a hard time as it was. But it's such an expensive sport to run. Those teams spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
Getting people to mass at those tracks anymore, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a very sustainable model.
Yeah. We're going to be
that
going
breaks
back
my heart a little bit. I like auto racing,
We're going to be going back to Ricky Bobby driving around a Wonder Bread car, and that's all I know about NASCAR. But but you'll see some. You may see some smaller businesses that jump in or something like that. But it's you don't think of it from a business standpoint.
I think what an impact is the fans and how they return to the games. Like, are we all going to be wearing masks and sitting away from each other for a while, or how are they going to manage that and navigate it? And are you going to want to go to a game and have those restrictions put in place? And then from a security standpoint, is wearing masks that was forbidden, right? Going into places before,
right?
Hiding whatever something.
And I'm thinking about the athletes too. Is there a sport approved? It's like you see nose guards for some of the ball players, or now the women's and softball or men's softball. You see more of the protective equipment. Are you going to start seeing athletes that are wearing masks? Or something like that.
Are we going to have access to locker rooms anymore? You go into post game after a basketball game, and it's super confined. Yep. Like a place like Cameron Indoor Stadium, the visiting locker room is the size of a small master closet, and I'm not even kidding. You have to step over and around people and reach out and get in funky positions just to be able to get an interview. So everybody's breathing.
You're getting somebody's germs.
Yeah, and sweat and all that stuff is in the air. And is that just going to be a thing of the past now, forever?
Yeah.
They're just going to zoom us at the end of the game. Maybe.
I mean, it is a little weird. It is a little weird to have to be in a locker room right after people are showering and they're sweaty, and it is the one place where you can get to them right away. But there has to be a better, especially with technology now, a better way to get to these folks, because locker rooms are going to change anyhow. They changed. They continue to change. You can't have your friends show up in the locker room. All these things have happened to control it. Now we got to control for. I mean, look. Before this all happened, MRSA was an increasing problem in locker rooms where people were getting infections from turf and all these other areas. So, having a bunch of folks standing around may not be the answer anymore.
I see a bunch of – go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, from a media gathering standpoint, the reason why it's important, and I think people forget about this, is not only just to get a more visceral reaction after games – it more has to do with deadlines. And when they play a 9:00 game and it gets over to 11 and our newscast is 11:25, I need to get in that locker room. I need to get Zion Williamson saying something, and I need to get it on television. So if you allow, the team to pick one representative, might not be who the media wants to talk to anyway, and then lets them shower and go to another room and sit in front of a Zoom call. And I can't even get in a question now because there's, 10 times the number of people that have access to them. It definitely changes the ability to get, some responses that you're looking for.
It sounds like you're going to see a bunch of Zoom booths set up outside of every locker room. And so after every game, players are required by the team need to go into the Zoom booth for 5 minutes and answer everybody's questions.
Well, before the world shut down sports, so that Wednesday at the ACC tournament, when social distancing was just coming into our vocabulary, they put up, this rope and had the players stand behind it. And we were supposed to just kind of reach over and grab them. Well, that was fine for a second. And then everybody's still crowded around each other. And then the player steps up and it's basically you're in front of his locker again.
Right.
So, there's going to be some trial and error, but I definitely think to your question, Eric, what is really going to change? I think the news gathering aspect for sure. Post game will change forever, probably. Yeah.
Hey, so how do folks find you online if they want to interact with you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Joe Mazur ABC11, and I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, Joe Mazur WTVD. So Twitter's the best place to hit me up, but I'm out there.
Did you want to field Mary's question?
Yeah. So Mary asked a couple of questions. Do you think owners and players need to have a PR person to put a good face on sports right now?
To put a good face on sports? I don't think so. I mean, I think so many athletes have stepped up and leagues have stepped up to help the community in so many different ways. Feeding people, so many arenas too that had all that food that was just going to go to waste, donated it, and all those things. I think fans will come back in droves. I think the teams will be relegated even in a higher position just because of how much they've helped. Let's see Mary's question. Does she have another one?
She also asked about just the evolution of media. We kind of covered that. So what questions do you have for Erik and I? You get a chance to take a whack at us.
Yeah.
You can yell me anytime. So
tell me what Erik was like to work with.
I was on. So first off, the boss before Erik was terrible and sowed a whole lot of mistrust and contempt. That's the first thing to understand. So Erik picks up that burden and probably inferred, but maybe didn't realize how much, at least on my team, we couldn't stand anything about headquarters. And we're removed quite far away from where they're at, so that we're maybe going to see him maybe one time in the entire deployment where we're at. Although physically we weren't far away, may as well be on the other side of the moon. But we did go to see them, but then it's all fake because we're all on our best behavior, trying to just get in and out, not be seen, do what we have to do and leave. So you have to understand that part of it. We didn't interact much with him, but there was a breath of fresh air from the poison the last person had sown. And I have a very positive opinion of him. And it was just a shame we didn't get to work more closely together, because I would have been interested in doing that. I would have rather had Erik the whole time than to have the other guy in there.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you were at Base Camp Angela, right?
I was at Rumbaugh, and then we moved to the lake bed that was outside of that, in that whole area.
Okay, so when we the company that commanded in Bosnia, it was 16 counterintelligence teams, or we call them force protection teams. And when we brought together all of these agents and interrogators and linguists and everybody else before we redeployed, there were guys in the company that had never met each other before. And so, you think about Band of Brothers in the whole TV series, which follows this airborne infantry company all through World War II, and these guys were brothers. These guys were strangers to each other because each of them were separated, small teams of 4 by 8 by themselves. So getting herding cats is an understatement, but bringing everybody together and getting them going in one direction, that was tough. That was you felt more like I said in an earlier program, it said sometimes you felt like a spy master, sometimes you felt like a caterer. That you're really just servicing all these different teams out there and making sure nobody's getting in trouble, nobody's causing problems. And boy, let me tell you, some of them were causing problems, but guys like Pete were out there, which were fantastic.
What years and where did you guys work together?
I joined the unit in '96. It was the very first deployment into Bosnia. It was right after the first peacekeepers went in there in December of '95. And then the entire company was very early January. I joined them from my previous unit in April of '96. And then we did not redeploy until November, but then I stayed in command through the next year in Germany. So we had field offices in Darmstadt, Hanau, which is where Pete was, Wiesbaden, and Heidelberg. And so we had, when we were back, we still operated out of different field offices. And so bringing folks together was a monumental task.
There were even with the Schaffenburg and Nuremberg offices, were those still in existence when you got there, Erik, or were they gone?
No, they were gone. That was another unit, 66 MI out of Augsburg, picked them up. So picked up that area. But there were some totally. I still tell stories about some of the stuff that went on there. And it was just, I just talked to my own kids about it. They're just like, I can't believe you did some of that stuff. It's like, well, it wasn't me. It was some of the extraordinary people that you're working with, and I can't believe they endured some of that as well. But I still remember being woken up as the weather got cold. Our tent was right outside of a minefield that had been laid during the Bosnian Civil War. And so you'd get woken up by the minefield exploding because the ground was getting cold and they were condensing around the mines and setting them off just by the weather. So it's, or somebody's farm animal walked in, something like that. So it's just, I guess it puts things in perspective. So when a virus or a pandemic like this, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is like the 35th day and I'm doing the same thing. It's like, well, we did that for 9 months every day.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I'm doing the same thing every day. So it's just that kind of thing. So, but yeah, that's, but I guess again, Joe, it's like Pete and I have gone back for years. We ended up having like about 150 folks in the company. By the time I left, they had moved everybody out and PCS'd them and everything, and without proven replacements. So when I finally left command, I think the company was down to 38 folks. Wow. So it was just one of those things. We had to leave the linguists there. We had an entire linguist reserve company from California who were Russian linguists, and we gave them a Serbo course, and they became Serbo-Croatian linguists overnight. But it was just, we had to leave them there. So it was just that kind of disruption going on. So I hear about, I see it on my social media feed. And, oh, this is, I'm going back stir crazy here, or these restrictions are horrible. And it's just like, God, we couldn't even leave base camp without, you look at the same dirt patch for a couple of months. But so everything is just in perspective. So it's all good now.
Yeah, I don't know, Pete, if you knew, but I actually did a story on kind of national security related over the weekend and had Erik on, interviewed him via FaceTime or whatever, and we got him on the local airways here on the ABC talking about national security and what it means for intelligence right now.
That was great.
Oh, that's awesome.
A great story, by the way. It's great. Nice. If you can't, you go to ABC 11, you can catch it. So it's just a 3-minute, thing. But Joe did a great job.
Well, Joe, you did a great job here on the show today too. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about sports with us and kind of looking at the future. It's neat just to be able to have someone come on and give us some different perspective. We get so much of the same thing every day. I appreciate you doing it.
I hope you didn't judge me for the Josh Hamilton over my right shoulder here.
Yeah. That poor guy. That guy can't put two good breaks together in a row.
No, he's still getting in trouble.
Yeah. That's going to continue, I guess, with him. It's just part of who he is. He just tends to find it. Well, listen. Enough about Josh Hamilton. Let's just talk about Joe. Thank you so much. He's on Twitter, everybody. You can find him if you're in the area. You can watch him ABC 11. Of course, you can find Erik Kleinsmith. You can find him on Facebook, all kinds of areas. And if you're interested in Intel, his book is fantastic. Get that thing. What else, Erik?
Don't find me on Facebook. That's just for me. But you can find me on LinkedIn, and there's. Our university publishes all of my articles in publicsafety.com. So I have at least 20, 30 articles I've done over the years for that one. And the latest one is, again, what Joe and I talked about on how do you evaluate these pandemic models, because all of them have been wrong. And so what's some of the questions you need to ask that when somebody throws these models out, it's like, oh, wait a minute, did you really take a hard look at who made that? So, but that's the latest article that I have up. And again, Joe and I talked about that on his broadcast as well.
All right. Well, thanks, fellas. Let me push the stop button here.